Hello everybody and welcome to this tutorial for Cambridge A-Level English Paper 4, Language and the Self. What I thought I would do is walk you through how I would approach a past paper question, how I would answer it. And the way that this will work is that I will show you the task, I'll show you the prompt, and I'll show you my framework for analysis, right, how I would deconstruct the prompt and apply it to the past paper question that you'll see in a moment that I've extracted. And then show you a couple of paragraphs, model paragraphs that I've written in response to the question. I know there aren't a ton of resources out there that help students visualize how to actually answer the question, so I hope this will help. So let's get into it. First thing, very important in any exam, is to understand the task at hand. In this case, this is the prompt that I've extracted, and it asks us to discuss what you feel are the most important issues raised in the text relating to the ways in which language can shape and reflect personal and social identity. Personal and social identity. You should refer to specific details from the text as well as to ideas and examples from your wider study of language and the self. So note that paper 4 language and the self questions can be framed slightly differently depending on the focus of the task at hand. In this case, we're asked to think about personal and social identity and the ways in which it interplays with language, right? The ways in which language shapes and reflects personal and social identity. So that should be a clue in terms of which theoretical worlds you're drawing from, right? And then when it asks us to refer to ideas and examples from wider study, right? That's all that you've been learning in your classes. So let's get into the framework for analysis, right? Once you've seen the passage, how do you actually go about organizing and structuring your response to this question? And what I offer to you is a framework for analysis that asks you to observe, categorize, and theorize. So first, observe. You observe what's happening in the text. What are the issues, tensions, concerns that you, as a linguist, see in the text? And I want to share this with you. You are a linguist. You are a sociolinguist. Right? You are reading about a particular set of linguistic issues. Your job is to observe them, right? To see what issues, what concerns, what problems, what dilemmas are made apparent in the text. So first is observe. Then you categorize. When you see this issue, when you observe this issue, what do you call it? What's the name for it? What linguistic concept is it linked to? What terminology might apply, right? So you are a linguist, you see, you observe, you notice this tension, this dilemma, this issue, this concern. Does it have a name? What would we linguists call it, right? So that's where you want to draw on your terminology. And then finally, you theorize, right? What theory explains this issue? What would my colleague theorist X have to say about issue Y? Right? So you observe the issue in the text, you categorize it, give it a name, apply a concept, terminology, and then you theorize it by drawing on other scholars. Right? How would other scholars frame or explain what is happening here? So OCT. And that is the bedrock for your paragraph. And if you do that 4, maybe 5 times in your essay for 4 different sort of observations, then I think you're in a good place for this paper 4 analysis. And the observation and categorization helps you directly answer the task, right? Which is asking you to extract details from the text. The theorization is what invites you to draw on your wider study. So this is how we keep ourselves honest to the task at hand. Now, this is the question, the past paper question that I have chosen from October, November 2023. You can find it online. It is this article, Why I'm No Longer Changing My Indian Phrases Around My White Friends. Right? So you can see that the prompt we've already discussed there. This is an article from a British news website. It was published in 2021. And I will not read this, but you are welcome to pause and I'll sort of show you the screenshot of part 1, part 2, and part 3 of the issue. But it's a provocative, it's an interesting, it's a rich text for linguists linguists like yourselves to get into. So this is part one. Here's how the article continues, part two. So feel free again to pause and read, or indeed find the text yourself. And then this is part three. This is the end. This sort of call to action. We need to normalize the use of phrases that come from our backgrounds. So now that you've got a sense of what the article is, I want to now apply the OCT framework, right? How I, if this was the task I was given, might apply this. So I'm looking for different moments, right? And moment number one that I'm drawn to in the text is this rather this feeling that this author's been altering the way they speak since before I can remember. I've made conscious decisions to change my vocabulary when I speak to someone outside of my Indian community. So you can sort of hear that this author's trying to survive in this world, right? They are looking for belonging. So that's my observation. I see that, and when I'm categorizing, I'm thinking about what terms can I draw on. One term that's also given in the text is code switching. You might have come across that. I can also hear the word convergence, right? And in particular, upwards convergence. One might argue that it's upward convergence. And there's also this idea of fearing being excluded. Right? So those are some of the terms, some of the concepts that I can name. And then there are a couple of ways in which I might theorize this. Right? They're not mutually exclusive. But when we talk about convergence, we have to think about our friend Howard Giles' communication accommodation theory, CAT. Right? They're trying to manage that social distance, reduce that social distance between their white friends and them. And then when you can also think about face theory a little bit when you're thinking about managing face and avoiding feelings of guilt and isolation and standing out, not belonging, not being included. So there's a way in which you can make an argument for Goffman and face. It's up to you. Again, it depends on how carefully you explain and link it. So that's the first moment. That's my first OCT. Second thing I'm drawn to, the second observation, is when the author is avoiding terms like mama and masi. I hope I'm pronouncing that reasonably well. In avoiding these terms, they felt overwhelmed. They felt like they were losing a part of themselves, right? So you can sense there's a pain here, right? It's not just about dropping words. It's almost that she's dropping parts of herself, right? There's a suppression of identity. And there's also a clue, right, that these words have meaning. Mama, masi, and some others have a particular weight, emotional weight, social weight in these particular communities, in these cultures, right? They might not have the same weight in the dominant culture, but they do in the subculture, in the sub-community that she's a part of. And so there's the idea of prestige and perhaps covert prestige. I might theorize and draw on Trudgill. I might, because Trudgill reminds us that sort of non-standard forms carry value in particular social groups. And my argument would be that, there's a bit of non-standard English, not so much grammatically, but the fact that we're sort of interplaying and mixing language, that's not sort of the dominant form of English, right? It's a hybridization that's happening that Trudgill might argue carries a covert prestige in particular social groups. So that's how I'm thinking about it. But you're welcome to obviously offer your own theoretical concept, but I'm just showing you how you OCT it. Third moment is almost the liberation that the author feels when they realize that it's okay to use your language, right, when speaking to different people, to different speech communities, right? When she starts using Indian phrases again, she feels it freeing, right? She found it nice to explain parts of their culture. So this is identity stuff when we're categorizing it, right? Language is a vehicle through which we express, reclaim, recover our identity. This idea of in-group and out-group, right? Is made manifest here. This idea that the in-group is affirmed, right? She feels that belonging. And I might draw on Tajfel and Turner and social identity theory here, right? This idea that language helps maintain group identity and belonging. That's how I might draw on Tajfel and Turner to tie this line of analysis together. So again, observe, categorize, theorize. And the fourth moment, the final moment, that I'm drawing on is at the conclusion there, right? This idea of normalizing using our own cultures, our own phrases, and resisting this urge to fit in, right? So the categorization, the kind of the terms that I'm thinking about is sociolect, right? Valuing sociolect and challenging this homogenization. Homogenous means to flatten, to make the same, and make everyone the same. And I think when I actually read that, I thought about dialect leveling, Kurzweil's idea of dialect leveling, and how almost this is a response to that. I could also bring in Trudgill as well, this idea of prestige, but those are some of the theoretical concepts I could use on. These are not exclusive, right? This is about you making an argument. So I'm curious to see how you might theorize these things, but I hope that you're seeing how you observe, categorize, and theorize once, twice, 3, 4 times, perhaps 5, if you have time and capacity, will set you up for success. So that's OCT. And now I try to put this all together, right? If I literally have 4 tables that show observation, categorization, theorization, that's your plan. Invest 15 solid minutes in doing this once you've read the article. Really extracting specific observations, 4 or 5 of them, categorize them, use your terminology and theorize them, whatever theoretical frameworks you can draw on. Invest in planning thoroughly, so that when you're writing your essay, you are clear, you're confident, you're organized, you're not making things up on the spot. That puts you under a lot of pressure. You don't want to do that. So next, I've extracted a couple of the paragraphs that I've written. I won't post my whole essay here, but this is one of the paragraphs that I've written, and I've sort of tried to code it on the side there, where the observation is, where the categorization is, where the theory is. Right, and I'm observing that the writer surfaces a tension and conflict they've been experiencing their whole life. They confess to altering the way they speak in different social contexts. Right, that's me observing what linguistic thing is happening there. And then I want to name it. There's a name for this thing. I want to categorize it. This is known as code switching, conscious or unconscious ways in which we adapt our speech to better manage the social distance between ourselves and the speech communities we find ourselves in. Right, as a linguist, you're categorizing these things. And now, theorization. Who am I going to bring in? Howard Giles. Giles's communication accommodation theory gives us a framework to understand the author's position. He would argue that we either converge or diverge in our speech depending on the context. By subconsciously removing Indian words and phrases, or consciously rather, removing Indian words and phrases and opting for English equivalents in predominantly white spaces, the author was making an effort to converge. Giles would label this as upward convergence, making one's language more standard and more aligned with dominant mainstream English. As we read the article, we see that this code switching and constant accommodation is not without cost, right? So I'm setting up what comes next. Key thing in paper 4 is that your essay has to flow, it has to be cogent. Don't just think about it as mechanically just dumping all of your theory on this, right? It has to be a lucid, a cogent argument. So really think about your discourse markers, how you're transitioning, how you're integrating quotations. Really, you have to write a thoughtful essay here, right? I'm not gonna go to the next paragraph. I'm gonna go to the one that I would probably chew later. But I want to show you the transition here, right? Because I think what I try to do later is highlight the central idea in social linguistics. The language is a vehicle through which we express our identities and signal belonging in communities, right? And that's how I ended the previous paragraph, and I transitioned to using these terms actually affirms her membership in the community. This is where Tajfel and Turner's social identity theory comes alive. Language doesn't just reflect group membership, it creates it. By dropping these terms, she wasn't just avoiding awkwardness with her white friends, she was drifting from her in-group. Hence, the author began to introduce Indian phrases back into her conversations. Gradually, she realized that it didn't create any discomfort or awkwardness with her friends. It wasn't a big deal. It didn't drive a wedge between them. In fact, she describes it as almost liberatory, affirming that it was nice explaining parts of my culture. So reintroducing these words wasn't just an act of a communication, it was an act of return, a way of reasserting her identity and claiming her place within her cultural group. So according to social identity theory, our sense of self is deeply tied to the groups we belong to. And here language becomes the bridge that reconnects her to her belonging. So this is a bit later in the essay, but I wanted to show you how, again, I used OCT. But notice that in this case, I played with it a little bit, right? I referenced the theory earlier, and then I come back to it. So I'm not, in my writing this, I wasn't as mechanical, but the key thing is that I was faithful to my observation, my categorization, and the theorization, right? So these are two paragraphs from sort of the middle third and the final third of the essay. You can see if you go back how the other two moments that I planned for, you can try write that paragraph yourself, those paragraphs yourselves, to offer your own theory. But just to conclude, start with the issue, observe, right? Name the issue, apply terminology, categorize, explain it using theory. Do this for 15 solid minutes during your planning phase, and then write thoughtfully, write coherently. All right? I hope this helps. Good luck, everybody. Goodbye.